Back to the Future, one of the most iconic films of all time. Starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover. For some of us, Back to the Future is one of the best films of all time. Some of us, Back to the Future, the trilogy, is one of the best trilogies of all time. But today I want to talk about the VHS release for Back to the Future. Specifically, this is the release from 1994. Now, I actually thought I had the McDonald's copy on VHS here, and we were going to talk about that. Turns out that was a Wayne's World VHS I was thinking of. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the Ecto-Violence channel. My name is Alec, and today we're talking Back to the Future on VHS, November 5th, 1955. That was the day Doc invented time travel. Re-elect Mayor Goldie Wilson. So let's go ahead and pop this tape in. You get a classic FBI warning. I love home video logos, and there is an awesome MCA Universal home video logo in this. And it's very hit or miss with tapes. I like to talk about trailers ahead of movies, but there are none on this tape. So we're going right into the movie, which has one of the most iconic openings of all time. I don't even remember watching this movie for the first time, but how this movie opens up, and it just kind of foreshadows a lot about the movie itself. It kind of explains who Marty and Doc are without you even meeting Doc, and barely seeing Marty's face. You know, as a kid, we always thought Marty was like the coolest guy on the fucking planet, and it kind of holds up. He's like Ferris Bueller if you took away all the bratty, annoying qualities, and made him extremely relatable, at least for teenage white boys in the 80s. But this guitar scene, as a kid, it was just awesome. You always imagined playing on an amplifier like that. Maybe not a guitar like that. Now I think a guitar like that is cool, but as a kid I was like, that thing's...
It's puny, what are you going to do with that?
I like how there's foreshadowing of the plutonium theft later in the movie, and these aren't things you pick up on when you're a kid watching it for the first time or anything.
Officials at the Pacific Nuclear Research Facility have denied the rumor that a case of missing plutonium was in fact stolen from their vault 2 weeks ago.
Once you watch this movie enough religiously, you're like noticing all these things. Another great thing, not enough people talk about, the Alan Silvestri score of this movie. I think this movie deserves a lot more credit than it gets, because the score is very iconic. You know, throughout the entire movie, there's various themes and motifs that are just instantly recognizable. Is there anything cooler than Marty sketching while they play The Power of Love? And I would like to point out this is the same little city set area that they use in Gremlins, this little city square area. And again, I was talking about, you know, foreshadowing and stuff. They show all this stuff about re-elect Mayor Goldie Wilson and stuff at the beginning. It's not on accident. All this stuff's very on purpose, even though it just feels like mundane shots happening in the movie. I love seeing Marty's band, the Pinheads, trying out, and obviously Huey Lewis being one of the judges.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.
Another one of these setups is the clock tower setup. Marty and Jennifer are about to kiss, and the lady shows up. Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower!
30 years ago, lightning struck that clock tower, and the clock hasn't run since.
Not only do you see the clock tower decaying kind of up over there in the background, you get the flyer, which Jennifer writes her phone number down on. He later shoves in his pocket to get the idea for later on. Like, this stuff's planned out really well for a movie that still is full of paradoxes and plot holes, because it's a time travel movie naturally, especially once you add in the other movies, but that's a whole other thing. So after school, and after hanging out with Jennifer, Marty goes home and he sees that the car has been towed home. Biff is there, just talking with his dad and just being a complete asshole. And as a kid, it never occurred to me that these were the young actors portraying old versions of themselves. And I mean, like, the first couple times I watched it, later on I was like, wow, are those old people playing young people or young people playing old people? I was confused. And I honestly think the old people makeup holds up really well in these movies. Like George and Biff and Lorraine, they all look great in these movies. And even the other ones, when they age them up and do different things with them, it just works. And plus, Biff is just full of great lines in this scene.
Hey, I have your car towed all the way to your house, and all you got for me is light beer? What are you looking at, butthead? Say hi to your mom for me.
And then there's more setup with all the dialogue there at the dinner scene with Marty and his parents and his brother and his sister. I mean, and if you're a huge fan, you know about Twin Pine Mall becoming the Lone Pine Mall at the end of the movie. So let's talk about the DeLorean reveal and the reveal of Doc himself, not just on a phone call. Not only do you get one great character in this movie, but you get two. And they're surrounded by other great characters as well, don't get me wrong, but these two are what make this movie work, obviously. And here in this first scene of them interacting together, it's perfect. Marty's filming Doc as he explains how all of this works, and just everything about it is just For me, it's pure nostalgia because I grew up watching this from a certain point forward religiously. I've seen these movies, I've watched so many things on the making of them. Hell, I've made videos about comparing the ending of Back to the Future and the beginning of Back to the Future 2. Because it's the same scene reshot, although there are some shots reused. Anyway, the Libyans show up and all hell breaks loose. Then we end up time traveling. You're introduced to his younger father, young Biff, eventually young Lorraine. A lot of the stuff starts to pay off, like the bird watching, the enchantment under the sea dance. His mother falls in love with him instead of his father, and that becomes the central plot of him and Doc trying to fix that, as well as get him back in time. And honestly, I think it's very thoughtful and very clever, just clever enough to be understandable and not have too many obvious paradoxes and things like that. I mean, once you start thinking about any time travel movie, it's like, well, wait a minute. But overall, I think Back to the Future, all three of them work pretty well. I do like how they take advantage of this whole being in the 50s thing. So, you know, the references to Darth Vader, Star Trek, who the hell is John F. Kennedy? All of this stuff.
My name is Darth Vader. I am an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
And they talk about how nostalgia kind of works in a 30-year cycle, and that's kind of a thing that this movie plays on. Because then you go back to 2015 and they have Cafe 80s, like they were predicting all that stuff. It's just brilliant the way that works, I think. And then there's several things in this movie that are kind of recreated in the other two movies. For one, Marty waking up and it being his mom and him having a dream and then having a sort of shocked scene. That happens in Back to the Future 2, it happens in Back to the Future 3.
Been asleep for almost 9 hours now.
The other one being Marty either chased around on a skateboard or a hoverboard or being hogtied around the neck and almost hung in the third movie. I guess technically he's not hogtied, but you know what I mean. He was roped. He was lassoed. I really appreciate the model scene. Watching this as a kid, I was like, man, I want to make model sets like this so I can play with them with my action figures. Doc, please build me one. Marvin Berry and the Starlighters, just like a perfect little addition to the end of this movie, and you get Marty performing Johnny B. Good, which, let's talk about that. I think that is one of the least appealing aspects of this movie, is that cover version of Chuck Berry's song. Mainly because the voice just does not add up to Michael J. Fox's voice. It doesn't work. However, I've been watching this movie since I was young enough that I don't even think about that when I watch it now. It took a more recent watch and really like thinking about things as I'm watching this movie. What doesn't work? That's one of the only things I could come up with. So you have all that, he saves Lorraine, and then he goes back in time. You have that whole crisis there right before he does, and the lightning's about to strike, and Doc has to climb up on the tower, and he's also trying to warn him about the future being shot. Honestly, great climax to a movie. Great ending, too. And here's something interesting about the home releases, specifically the VHS tapes. In 1986, they started adding "to be continued" at the end of the home releases of these movies. Now, they only did it through VHS. You don't find that on the home release versions on DVD or Blu-ray. Back to the Future 2, we know now naturally has that trailer for Back to the Future 3 at the end of it. But when they made Back to the Future, they didn't know they were going to make more movies. That's why they put Jennifer in the car. So now that we've talked about the movie itself, let's talk about the positives and the negatives, and then we'll rate it. So the positives of this movie. The cast and characters, obviously. We talked about Marty. We talked a little bit about Doc. So the character of Marty is very interesting to me. He's one of these cool, iconic characters that all of us looked up to. Like, Michael J. Fox was the epitome of cool. Again, I compare him to Ferris Bueller, but being less of a dick and way more relatable. And you know what? It's in a way, it's stuff like Teen Wolf as well. You know, I was never huge into Family Ties, but oddly enough, my favorite episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm is the Michael J. Fox episode. And if you haven't seen that, I recommend going and looking at it. It's hilarious. Christopher Lloyd, all right? Christopher Lloyd is great as well. Before I saw Back to the Future, I knew him from the Dennis the Menace movie. How weird is that? And while you're here, if you've seen Dennis the Menace, did that movie make you want to eat an apple? Or did it make you want to eat baked beans? Or did it repulse you from baked beans? Let me know in the comments down below. But Christopher Lloyd, you know, he's in Clue as well, and that's one of my favorite movies. He's great, and as a kid, I think one of the most confusing things for me was when they removed the old person makeup from him, because on VHS you can't really see the clarity of that. He kind of just looks the same. And I think they were kind of joking around with that because Christopher Lloyd didn't normally look like either of those, obviously. And then you have Leah Thompson, who around this time was also in Red Dawn. I really enjoy that movie. Very interesting. Weird, but you know, she's in all 3 of these movies as well, and just did an excellent job. Love her. Crispin Glover, he obviously got shafted in the later movies. I might do a whole video on that sometime, so I'm not going to go too deep into it for this one, but I really enjoy Crispin Glover as both an actor and a person. Everything from Friday the 13th Part 4, River's Edge, like Charlie's Angels, Willard. I mean, hell, Hot Tub Time Machine even. And then Thomas F. Wilson as Biff. I think the only other thing I've really seen him in was... Okay, he was in an episode of Workaholics as well, but he was in Freaks and Geeks as the coach. And I really enjoy him in that. I love Freaks and Geeks. I guess I should have talked about this earlier, but because it's not really a positive, but they fired Eric Stoltz from this movie. And I have done a short little video on that before. You can check that out if you want, but that's very interesting because some people think that there's still footage of him in this movie. Just shots when it's just Marty's hands grabbing Biff and stuff like that, like they think. Okay, so the design of obviously the DeLorean, the explanation, the science, and everything like that, perfect. Perfect execution. It's a mad scientist character, but he's not so crazy that you're afraid of him. He's wacky and he's goofy, but he's also pretty positive human, but he's very, like, cracked out almost, it seems, you know? He's, like, always, oh, full of anxiety, oh. Biff is a character, very classic bully-type character, but the way he's portrayed and the way he's written is just, there's something about it that's different. It's better. And I'm just glad, honestly, that they found use for him in the other movies as well. Like, there's things where you look back on it and be like, that might not have made much sense if you were, like, talking about the planning of the movies and stuff, having all these characters come back and portray other people and stuff, but man, it works with Back to the Future. We briefly mentioned the score earlier. The score is excellent. It drives this movie home, as well as the song choices from Huey Lewis and the cameo. Just the fact that Marty is a skateboarding, guitar-playing teenager with a girlfriend in the 80s, like they just really captured something special with this first movie and the trilogy in general, but everything is just near perfect. This movie's like a 99%. As far as negatives go for Back to the Future, there aren't many. Again, I mentioned maybe the whole Marvin Berry thing's a little cringe, calling Chuck Berry, Marty's voice during that in particular, during that cover song, it just doesn't sound anything like Michael J. Fox, right? So stuff like that definitely rubs me the wrong way sometimes. And before I rate Back to the Future, why don't you go ahead and jump in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of Back to the Future. And as a trilogy on the whole, what do you think of it? On my heart scale, I'm going to give Back to the Future 5 out of 5 hearts. There aren't many movies that I give absolute 5 out of 5s out of, but Back to the Future is definitely one of them. I try to limit some of my collecting of like toys and merchandising to a couple things, and Back to the Future is on that approved list for me. If you like this video, be sure to check out this one and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.